I'm joined now by candidate for the U.S. Senate in Michigan, Mallory McMorrow. Thanks so much for joining me again.
Hey, glad to be here.
So we have just watched as RFK and Donald Trump together combined all of their non-existent years of medical training to decide to offer up some edicts about how Americans should take some medicine. They focus specifically on this idea that pregnant women should not be taking Tylenol. And so, as a mom, I'm just curious, watching this stuff play out, can I have your general reaction to what we've seen at the hands of Trump and RFK?
Oh my God, just shut up. You are not doctors. It is when you are a pregnant woman, I cannot explain to you how everywhere you go, you will be pummeled with advice and critiques. And are you eating? And are you sleeping? And are you
Yeah.
doing the right things? And you can't exercise because that's going to hurt the baby. The last thing that pregnant women need is RFK, a man who, was blowing up whale carcasses and dropping off dead bears in the woods, and Donald Trump giving them medical advice. Listen to your doctor, not these two idiots.
And so, as part of this broader like MAHA movement, can I have your response to the fact that we were promised one thing when this movement kind of took off, and when Trump appointed RFK as Secretary of Health and Human Services, and now what we've got is just crackpot medical advice about how there is some link that truly does not exist between autism and Tylenol, and cheering on fast food restaurants that use beef tallow instead of what canola oil, and that there was the elimination of like a certain dye in Fruit Loops, as if Fruit Loops are good now. I mean, can you talk about the bait and switch that Americans got, who expected one thing with this MAHA movement and were delivered something entirely different?
Yeah, I mean, the idea that any of this is making America healthy again is a joke. You're making junk food arguably a little less junky, but even that is not
Marginally better.
marginally,
Yeah.
you're encouraging people to eat at Steak and Shake. And don't get me wrong, like there was a Steak and Shake down the street from me in college that I loved, but by no means is that healthy food that you should regularly consume. Michelle Obama ran an entire campaign about encouraging kids to exercise and to eat fruits and vegetables and how to cook healthy meals. And she was kind of shoved off as a joke. This was a
Yeah.
side project that nobody took seriously. And I want to make a point that we should not dismiss moms' real concerns about the impacts of corporate greed and the impact of the pharmaceutical industry and the impact of, the healthcare industry that seems to be focused too much on squeezing every last dime out of us instead of keeping us healthy. They tapped into the right anger points.
Right.
But what they're giving us is nothing that's going to make America healthy again. What is actually very dangerous during pregnancy is fever that can really damage the baby. And doctors will tell you that you should take Tylenol if you have a fever to protect your baby. Now, as with everything, and this was the same during the fight for reproductive rights that is still ongoing, they want to tell you that first, you cannot decide for yourself if and when to get pregnant. And oh, by the way, when you get pregnant, you shouldn't be listening to your doctor anymore. You should be listening to Donald Trump telling you to, quote, tough it out.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, like women are responsible for the continuation of the entire human species. You don't tell us to tough it out, we're going to work with our doctors. And it's a joke. And it's such a bait and switch at the expense of health. Like none of this
Right.
is making us any healthier.
Is there some broader acknowledgement, like from the community of people who were most susceptible to this MAHA movement? Is there some acknowledgement by these people? Because look, Tylenol is not like, if you go back into the days of COVID, right? All of what we spoke about during COVID, the vaccines, mRNA, ivermectin, it's all a little bit like amorphous, nebulous. It's certainly not easy for people to identify these things in the same way that Tylenol is. But when you start to enter into this territory, is there some acknowledgement from the folks, at least that you've spoken with, that this is not on the level?
I think there's some deep frustration, and I want to talk a little bit personally if I can. What I watched happen during the COVID-19 pandemic, during which I was pregnant, uh, I watched that our country really failed women and moms. That with school shutdowns and business closures, we were doing the best we had with the information that we had, but moms were left to hold a lot of the bag. So schools were closed. All of a sudden, working moms were at home with their kids. If you were able to get a flexible work arrangement from your employer, you were trying to do both. You were also serving effectively as a teacher for your kid because your kid was trying to do Zoom school, which I logged on just to one school in my district to try to provide a Capitol tour virtually and just watch chaos on the screen, all
Yeah.
of these Zoom windows. And the only thing really there for so many young women and moms was social media. And what I saw happen was there was this rapid slip down the rabbit hole for a lot of women trying to make sense of what was happening. And that led very quickly into some pretty dark places. You start to question why decisions are being made by the government. You start to question the safety of vaccines. And I heard this coming out of my community. And I think that too many people were too dismissive of these fears. But there are a lot of women and a lot of moms who, care deeply about their kids and care deeply about their own health, and they do want healthier foods. That isn't removing one red dye out of Fruit Loops and
Yeah.
pretending that that's okay. So I am hearing from women of like, this still doesn't address the problem. We still have healthcare that is too expensive and I can't access. And, they're slashing Medicaid, but oh, we're going to tell you on top of slashing healthcare. And if you happen to work in a hospital system, I talk to a lot of women who may work in the medical field knowing that their job is at risk now because of the impacts of this funding cut. Um, and now you're being told to tough it out during pregnancy. It's
So
just insane.
what does MAHA look like in your eyes if you're doing this in good faith, if you're doing this on the level, if you're not just basically effectuating some bait and switch at the hands of a bunch of, idiots in the federal government who have no idea what the fuck they're talking about, but instead want to benefit from whatever kickbacks they're getting from Steak and Shake and fruit, like whatever it may be. What does it look like when it's done right?
I think it's meeting moms where they are. And more that is on social media. I am now a working mom. My daughter is 4.5. I am balancing being the Senate Majority Whip here in the state of Michigan and running a US Senate campaign and being a mom. It is just those quick videos on social media. So I think just sharing my own experience and sharing my own stories and being willing to listen and acknowledge people's anxieties and fears, particularly mom's anxieties and fears, as valid instead of being dismissive. But then let's talk about things like how do we make sure we do have access to healthier foods? How do we address food deserts? How do we ensure that, in a state like ours, that we're not cutting the free breakfast and lunch program that has partnered with a lot of our farms across the state of Michigan to provide healthy meals to kids in schools? How are we encouraging healthier lifestyles and to model that? My daughter, I took her to the Corktown 5K that I ran in Detroit, and they had a kids half mile, right? Like I signed her up for that. We're doing that together. And I do think that there is a way to build a healthier culture, and there need to be policies that reflect that desire instead of this bait and switch of, oh, now we're making fries with beef tallow. Like
Yeah.
it's still fries.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not it.
So much of the coalition that catapulted Trump and these Republicans into power was based on promises to different groups that things would be done. And now we're seeing kind of the consequences of those groups having believed these people. You have farmers that because of the trade war that Trump unilaterally executed and that was allowed to be put through thanks to the Republicans in Congress. These farmers are watching crops die because there's nobody to sell soybeans to. For example, you have the MAHA movement that is just watching RFK take victory laps over taking like some random red dye out of Fruit Loops and claiming victory that Americans are suddenly healthy now. You have people who were told that healthcare would be protected and that earned benefits would never be touched, who've watched Medicaid get stripped away and food assistance get stripped away to the tune of billions of dollars. You have people who were promised lower costs and listened to Donald Trump when, to such a granular level, he said that eggs, that the price of eggs was what he was focused on. And now he's like, I don't give a shit. And prices of everything are going up while these Republicans sit idly by and do nothing. And so in light of what we've seen right now, what would your message be to all of these different groups of Americans who are in vulnerable situations and believed this Republican Party when they told them that they would act in service of those people, and instead are just basically there to serve Donald Trump and his bottom line?
Look, my message is he lied to you. He lied to you. He took advantage of your very rightful anger and fear about how things were going. Because I think we have to acknowledge, I've acknowledged on my campaign, things have been broken for people for a really long time. It
Yeah.
wasn't just under the Trump administration. I'm somebody who graduated college into the recession. I found myself sleeping in the back of my car. I applied to more than 300 jobs. I couldn't get a job for a long time. And for a lot of people, it has felt like living in this time of just endless tension, of never feeling like you can dig your way out of the hole. Trump announced just today that they are going to provide relief dollars to farmers because of the impacts of tariffs. Farmers don't want handouts. They want to be able to sell their crops. Exactly
Right.
to your point. We want to be able to operate our own businesses. That is something that I have heard loud and clear at every event across the state is we don't want the government to do it for us. We want to do it for ourselves. We just want it to be fair. And that's got to be the message that, Donald Trump was right in that he understood why you were angry. But look at what he's delivering, and it's not actually solving any of those problems. And in fact, it's going to make you more reliant on the government to
Right.
fix something that they broke. This was entirely man-made. So we have an opportunity and frankly, responsibility to provide a different way forward that gives people freedom and independence, freedom and independence to raise your family, to know you're going to have access to healthcare, to know you're going to have access to healthy food, to know that if you're a farmer, you're going to be able to sell your crops and run your business, and that all of that is going to be secure.
Well said. Mallory, how can folks who are watching and listening help your campaign?
You can find us at mcmorrowformichigan.com. I am running in what is going to be one of the most expensive, heavily watched Senate races in the entire country. So I'm asking you to donate $5, $10, whatever you can, sign up to volunteer. I really believe in a state as important as Michigan, in a race as important as the US Senate race, we have an opportunity here to rewrite what the Democratic Party can do for people.
Awesome. I'll put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. If you're listening on the podcast, it'll be in the show notes. Mallory, thanks so much for taking the time. Best of luck in the campaign trail.
Thanks, Brian.